The unexpected war. Commanders Yera stood inside her ship, gazing down at Earth from the large viewing screen. The blue planet floated peacefully in the vastness of space, its white clouds drifting over green lands and deep oceans. To her, it looked small, weak, a primitive world that had somehow survived despite its outdated technology and simple ways. She had read reports about humans. The Exilary Empire, her people, had been watching Earth for decades. The humans had no interstellar travel, no advanced energy weapons, and no planetary shields. Their civilization was divided into nations, constantly fighting among themselves. They relied on machines, not bioenhancements like the Exilary. To Ziara, humans were an insignificant species, not even worth considering as a threat. But orders were orders. The Exilary High Command had sent her to observe, analyze, and prepare the invasion. Earth was rich in resources, and the Empire needed new territories to expand. The plan was simple: send a fleet, disable human defenses, and take over. It would be over within days. Still, Ziara was curious. She had studied many species, but none were as unpredictable as humans. They were fragile yet stubborn, weak yet creative. She wanted to understand them better before their inevitable defeat. First contact. Disguised as a researcher, Ziara landed in a quiet human town. The air smelled fresh, unlike the artificial environments of Silari cities. She walked through the streets, blending in thanks to her advanced camouflage suit. Humans bustled around, talking, laughing, completely unaware that an alien stood among them. Then, she saw something that made her stop. A group of small humans, children, were playing in a park. They had tiny plastic soldiers arranged in battle formations. One boy moved a piece forward and shouted, "Attack! Flank from the left." Another girl countered, "No, we set a trap. You walked right into it." Ziara raised an eyebrow. Were these children planning military tactics? She watched closely as they moved their toy soldiers with careful strategy, predicting each other's moves, setting up ambushes, adapting to new attacks. Their minds worked faster than some of her own soldiers in training. "They're just playing," she told herself. "It means nothing." But she wasn't convinced. Testing the humans. Back on her ship, Ziara decided to run a test. She sent a small unmanned drone into the city, programming it to create a harmless disturbance. Just a minor power outage. Nothing dangerous. She wanted to see how humans reacted to unexpected problems. To her shock, the response was immediate. Within minutes, human engineers were working to restore power, and local experts were trying to trace the cause. But what truly stunned Ziara was what happened next. A small human, no older than 8 years old, found the fallen drone in an alleyway. Instead of running away in fear, the child picked it up, turned it over, and examined it. Then, with surprising ease, the child removed a panel, studied the internal wiring, and connected 2 loose circuits. The drone powered back on. Ziara's breath caught in her throat. How? This was alien technology, far beyond human understanding. And yet, this child had fixed it in less than 5 minutes. She watched as the boy placed the drone back on the ground. The machine lifted into the air and flew away, its systems fully restored. This wasn't just intelligence. This was instinct. Humans, even at their youngest, had an ability that defied logic. A dangerous realization. Ziara sat in her command chair, her mind racing. Humans weren't just learning fast. They were adapting faster than any species she had encountered. If their children could figure out alien technology in minutes, what could their scientists, soldiers, and engineers do in a real war? She suddenly felt uneasy. Maybe Earth wouldn't be as easy to conquer as she had thought. Maybe humans were more dangerous than anyone had realized. And if the Exilari attacked, they might not be the hunters. They might be the hunted. Underestimating the humans. Commander Ziara sat alone in the command chamber of her ship, deep in thought. The soft hum of the control panels filled the room, but she barely noticed. The events of the last few hours replayed in her mind. She had expected Earth to be a primitive, disorganized world, easy to conquer with minimal resistance. But what she had seen disturbed her. A human child, not a scientist, not a trained engineer, but a mere child, had repaired alien technology in minutes. It was no accident. It wasn't luck. It was something more. Ziara had studied hundreds of species across the galaxy, and in every case, intelligence took time to develop. Species that were physically weak often relied on tools, but they needed generations to refine their knowledge. Humans, however, seemed different. They learned fast, adapted even faster, and that made them dangerous. She needed to test them further. A test of strength. Ziara wasn't ready to report her findings to the Xilari High Command. The Empire expected Earth to fall without a fight, and she wasn't about to tell them they might be wrong. No, she needed proof. That night, she sent 2 more scouting drones, this time to a human military base. Not for an attack, just to observe their responses. She programmed the drones to create a simulated emergency, a fake cyber attack on their defense systems. If humans truly were as unprepared as the Xilari believed, they would panic. They would scramble, their outdated systems would crash, and the base would fall into chaos. She waited, watching from her ship's surveillance feed. At first, everything went as expected. Alarms blared. Soldiers rushed through the base, trying to figure out what was happening. Then, something changed. Within 3 minutes, human technicians isolated the problem. Within 5 minutes, they shut down the fake virus before it could spread. And within 10 minutes, they did something that made Ziara's blood run cold. They traced the signal. They shouldn't have been able to do that. Her drones were programmed with advanced cloaking and encryption. No species, not even the Xilari's enemies, had ever been able to detect them so quickly. And yet, here were the humans, not only detecting the attack but countering it as if they had seen this before. One technician, barely older than a teenager, typed furiously into his console. "Whoever is messing with us, they're about to have a very bad day," he muttered. The feed cut out. Ziara jolted upright. Impossible. The humans had just hacked into her drones. She turned to her control panel, working quickly to reestablish contact. But before she could react, the drone's programming had been overridden. And then, a message flashed onto her ship's main screen. "Nice try." Ziara's hands clenched into fists. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The smallest warriors. Now, she needed to know more. Disguising herself again, Ziara moved through the human city, blending with the crowds. She had seen how their military responded under pressure, but now she wanted to see their civilians. And once again, it wasn't the soldiers that caught her attention. It was the children. At a large community center, a group of kids sat in a competition hall, staring at screens. She watched as they moved digital pieces across a battlefield, a war simulation. One child, a girl no older than 10, launched a coordinated ambush on her opponent. Another boy countered by predicting her movement pattern and setting a trap. They were planning attacks and defenses with the skill of seasoned generals. Ziara leaned in, fascinated. These weren't just games. These were strategic battle simulations. And these children were mastering them. For the first time in her life, Ziara felt something new. Doubt. She had laughed at the idea of human intelligence before, but now she realized something chilling. Humans didn't just learn war. They played with it. And if they were this good at war as children, what would they become as adults? A shocking discovery. Back on her ship, Ziara ran a deeper analysis. She pulled every record she could find on human history, warfare, and technological progress. What she found terrified her. In the span of just 200 years, humans had gone from horseback warfare to nuclear weapons, from simple machines to artificial intelligence. They weren't evolving like other species. They were accelerating. She studied their greatest battles, how they had defeated larger, stronger enemies with sheer ingenuity, how they had adapted their strategies mid-war, changing their entire approach faster than any species she had ever seen. How they had even turned their own weaknesses into advantages. And then she found something even worse. A auxiliary scout ship had encountered humans centuries ago. The Empire had dismissed them as insignificant. But the humans had remembered. They had recorded the encounter, studied it, prepared for it. And now, when the auxiliary returned, humans weren't afraid. They were ready. The beginning of the end. Ziara shut off the display and stood up. She had been sent to analyze Earth, prepare for its invasion, and report back to the Empire. But now, she had a choice. She could tell her leaders the truth, that humans were not just another primitive species, that they were dangerous in a way no one had predicted, that an invasion of Earth would not be an easy victory, but a war the auxiliary might not win. Or she could remain silent and let her people walk into a battle they didn't understand. She exhaled, feeling a strange mix of fear and admiration. For the first time, she wondered, was the auxiliary empire truly the superior race, or had they just woken a sleeping giant? The secret behind the tiny warriors. Commander Ziara sat in the dimly lit chamber of her ship, staring at the holographic display in front of her. Rows of human history, technological advancements, and military strategies scrolled across the screen. The more she read, the deeper her unease grew. She had always believed in the superiority of the auxiliary. They were an ancient, disciplined empire. Their soldiers trained from birth, their technology refined over millennia. Their strategies were based on logic, patterns, and predictability. But humans were chaos incarnate. They didn't fight wars the way other species did. They didn't follow patterns. They broke them. They rewrote the rules of battle. The simulation attacks she had launched had been countered with speed and precision. A mere teenager had hacked her drones. Children played war games with the skill of trained generals. And the scariest part, they weren't even trying their hardest yet. Infiltrating a human training facility, Ziara needed answers. She needed to see how humans trained, not just their soldiers, but their civilians, their children. She disguised herself again, modifying her camouflage suit to blend in with human society. This time, she didn't go to a military base or a battlefield. Instead, she entered a science and technology institute, a place where young humans were trained. The facility was vast, filled with students of all ages, working with machines, programming complex codes, and discussing theories that made even auxiliary engineers pause. She moved cautiously, her augmented eyes scanning the projects. A group of children gathered around a robotic arm, debating how to make it move faster with minimal energy. Another group was running a cybersecurity simulation, identifying weaknesses in a system and fixing them in real time. A class of younger children was studying military history, analyzing past battles, and debating how different strategies could have changed the outcomes. Ziara felt something unfamiliar creeping into her mind. Fear. She had expected to see young minds full of potential. She hadn't expected to see warriors in the making. These weren't just students. They were tacticians, engineers, and problem solvers. Their education wasn't just about knowledge. It was about adaptation, creativity, and resilience. Humans weren't taught war. They were born into it, a mind unlike any other. Ziara continued her silent observations, but she soon noticed something else. Humans didn't just learn from their teachers. They challenged them. She watched as a young boy interrupted his instructor, pointing out a flaw in a war simulation program. The teacher listened, considered his point, and agreed. Another student, barely a teenager, built a drone enhancement module that auxiliary researchers would take years to perfect. Humans didn't just accept knowledge. They questioned it, reshaped it, and improved upon it. This was the real reason for their rapid advancement. It wasn't just intelligence. It was rebellion against stagnation. And this was something the auxiliary had never encountered before. The unorthodox battlefield. Ziara moved deeper into the facility, and found herself inside a massive simulation room. A large holographic battlefield stretched across the walls, filled with warships, alien armies, and planetary defenses. At the center of it all stood two groups of children, locked in an intense battle simulation. On one side was a conventional force, using logical tactics, direct assaults, and strategic formations. It was a strategy that mirrored the way Xilari fought their wars. On the other side, a scattered, unpredictable mess. Instead of following set formations, the second group broke every rule. They baited their enemies into false attacks, set traps disguised as weaknesses, and adapted in real time to every move made against them. Within minutes, the second team overwhelmed the first. They didn't win because they had more resources or better firepower. They won because they thought differently. They didn't fight the war the right way. They fought to win. A dangerous truth. Ziara stepped out of the facility, her mind racing. She had studied war her entire life. She had fought in battles that shaped the fate of galaxies. But for the first time, she realized something horrifying. The Xilari were predictable. They relied on their perfectly trained soldiers, their flawless formations, their superior technology. Humans had none of that. Yet they had the one thing that made them the most dangerous species she had ever encountered. They refused to fight fair. They would use their weaknesses as strengths. They would turn their disadvantages into opportunities. And when backed into a corner, they would change the very definition of war. The decision. Ziara returned to her ship, sitting in silence. The stars outside the window seemed colder now, distant and unwelcoming. She had planned to send a report to the Xilari High Command, confirming Earth's vulnerability and giving the signal for invasion. But now, she wasn't so sure. If the Xilari attacked Earth, it would not be an easy conquest. It would be a war unlike any they had ever fought. And for the first time, Ziara wondered, would the Xilari Empire even survive it? The Xilari invasion begins. Commander Ziara stood in the center of her command deck, staring at the incoming fleet displayed on her ship's holoscreen. The invasion had begun. Despite her warnings, the Xilari High Command had dismissed her concerns about Earth. Her report had been overruled. The Empire was convinced that humans were no different from other primitive species. They had no advanced weaponry, no interstellar defenses, and no experience fighting a technologically superior enemy. The Xilari war doctrine was clear. Strike fast. Overwhelm. Conquer. The fleet now hovered above Earth's atmosphere, preparing to launch the first phase of the attack. Ziara clenched her fists. She knew this war would not unfold the way her people expected. The Xilari thought they were the hunters. They were wrong. The first strike. The Xilari launched their invasion with precision and arrogance. Dozens of warships entered Earth's skies, their sleek metallic hulls cutting through the clouds like blades. They jammed communications, disabling satellites, and cutting off Earth's nations from one another. They deployed electromagnetic pulses, EMP, shutting down entire power grids. Cities went dark. They descended on military bases first, believing they would cripple Earth's defenses in mere hours. It was a flawless opening move. Everything was going exactly as planned. And then, everything went wrong. The unexpected counterattack. The Xilari expected panic, surrender, fear. Instead, they got resistance. Within minutes of the first attack, Earth's forces did something no other species had done before. They adapted. In an underground military base, human engineers had anticipated a possible EMP attack. They had shielded key communication hubs and developed manual backup systems. Within 20 minutes, a secret human task force restored global communications. Within 30 minutes, military bases, thought to be crippled, were back online, using reserve power grids. Within an hour, the Xilari fleet faced something they had never encountered before, a species that refused to go down. Humans had been expecting an invasion. They had been preparing for it for years. the rise of the smallest warriors. And then something even stranger happened. Ziara had warned her superiors about human children. She had studied their games, their simulations, their tactical thinking. But no one had believed her. Now she watched in shock as these very children took part in Earth's greatest defense. A group of young engineers, barely in their teens, had hacked into captured Silari drones. Instead of destroying them, they reprogrammed them, turning Silari technology against its own creators. Meanwhile, a group of students developed a counter-strategy based on tactics they had learned from video games, history books, and war simulations. The Silari officers watching the battle from their own ships had no idea what was happening. Their fleet had superior weapons, superior technology, and centuries of war experience. And yet, they were losing ground to children. The fall of Silari war doctrine. The Silari fought war by logic, order, tactical precision. Humans fought war by breaking the rules. Their strategies were unpredictable, chaotic, and completely illogical. Silari soldiers marched in disciplined formations. Humans used guerrilla warfare, ambushes, deception, and psychological tricks. Silari ships followed pre-calculated battle maneuvers. Humans used unconventional attack patterns, making up strategies on the spot. Silari commanders relied on AI-driven battle analytics. Humans relied on instinct. And instinct was winning. Ziara watched as one Silari warship was taken down, not by missiles or energy weapons, but by human ingenuity. An old, outdated cargo ship, something humans had pulled from a scrapyard, had been rigged into a massive EMP bomb and detonated in the heart of the fleet. The explosion disabled multiple Silari warships in seconds. Ziara's hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just a battle. This was a massacre. And that Silari were the prey. The impossible decision. A desperate transmission came from the Silari High Command. Commander Ziara, what is happening? How are we losing? She took a slow breath. The answer was obvious. The Silari had believed strength came from weapons, technology, and numbers. But humans had something stronger. They had adaptability, creativity, a refusal to follow the rules of war. And now, the Silari were paying the price. She had two choices. She could remain loyal to the Empire and continue fighting a war that could wipe out both sides. Or she could do the unthinkable. Defect. For the first time in her life, Ziara hesitated. The Silari had always seen themselves as the dominant force in the galaxy. But Earth had humbled them in a single day. She took a deep breath, her decision made. She turned to her crew. Retreat. Now. Commander. That's an order. The Silari ships began pulling back, breaking formation. The invasion fleet was in full retreat. She had never seen anything like it. A single planet, a species dismissed as weak, had forced an intergalactic empire to flee. And for the first time, she understood the truth. The Silari were not superior. Humanity was, and the rest of the galaxy had no idea what was coming. Humanity's unpredictable tactics. The Silari fleet was in full retreat. For the first time in the history of their empire, they had been forced to withdraw from an inferior species. Commander Ziara stood on the bridge of her ship, her mind in turmoil. The Silari High Command had ordered her to analyze Earth, weaken its defenses, and oversee its conquest. Instead, she had just ordered a retreat. Around her, her officers looked shaken, confused, and even afraid. Silari did not retreat. Silari did not lose. And yet today they had. The humans had torn through Silari war doctrine like it was a child's playbook. Their armies weren't stronger. Their weapons weren't better. But their minds were terrifying. The High Command's fury. The communication from Silari High Command came instantly. A holographic image of Supreme Strategist Verilos appeared before Ziara. His silver eyes were burning with rage. Commander. His voice was like a blade. Explain. This. Failure. Ziera knew what they expected to hear: excuses, damage reports, and empty reassurances. But she had no excuses. She had seen the truth, and now she had to decide whether to lie to protect her own honor or tell them what no auxiliary wanted to believe. She chose the truth. We lost. Silence fell over the bridge. The officers who had been pretending to work stiffened. No auxiliary had ever uttered those words before. Lost. Varlos hissed. You had every advantage. What happened? Ziara took a slow breath. They happened. The humans. We underestimated them. She saw the supreme strategist's mouth curl into a sneer. How could a species of primitive animals defeat the finest fleet in the Auxiliary Empire? Ziara's voice was steady, but inside, she felt something growing. Something dangerous. Respect. Because they fight in ways we cannot predict. They are not bound by logic. They don't follow rules. They are adaptable. Varlo scoffed. A chaotic species is a weak species. The Empire will crush them. Ziara narrowed her eyes. Then send another fleet. See what happens. She let her words sink in. Varlo's expression faltered. The humans hadn't even used their full strength yet. Their leaders hadn't panicked when their cities lost power. Their armies hadn't crumbled under superior technology. Instead, they had outthought, outmaneuvered, and outplayed the Auxiliary at every turn. If High Command sent a second wave, the outcome would be worse. Much worse. Varlo stared at her, his rage now mixed with something else: uncertainty. And for the first time, the supreme strategist of the Auxiliary had no response. A hidden enemy among them. Ziera cut the transmission. She turned to her officers, expecting to see disapproval, anger, even mutiny. But instead, she saw fear. And not fear of her. Fear of the humans. They are going to retaliate, aren't they? One of her officers whispered. Ziera didn't answer. She had studied human history. She knew what happened when a species provoked them. Humanity never forgot. And they never forgave. The psychological war begins. The Auxiliary weren't the only ones watching. Across the galaxy, other species had been observing the invasion. They had expected a quick, effortless victory. Instead, they had seen a disaster. And now, whispers had started to spread across the stars. If the mighty Auxiliary Empire could not defeat Earth, who could? The illusion of Auxiliary superiority was shattered. Ziera saw it in her officers' eyes. Doubt. The worst thing that could infect an empire. And the humans hadn't even needed to fire the first shot. They had let the Auxiliary defeat themselves. The unpredictable counterattack. Days passed. The Auxiliary expected retaliation. A fleet of human warships. An army of their own warriors descending upon Auxiliary worlds. Instead, nothing happened. And that was worse. The silence was unnerving. High Command tried to cover up the battle. But the truth had already spread. Ziera knew what the humans were doing. They weren't attacking. They were waiting. Letting paranoia sink in. Letting the Auxiliary question themselves. And in the end, that was more damaging than any weapon. The offer of an alliance. One night, while studying the latest reports, Ziera received a private message. Not from High Command. Not from a Auxiliary leader. But from Earth. A human general had sent a transmission directly to her. The message was short. Simple. You don't have to be our enemy. Ziera's heart pounded. This was an invitation. An offer. She could return to her empire, fight a losing war, and watch the Auxiliary crumble against an enemy they refused to understand. Or she could do something unthinkable. She could defect. Ziera's claws dug into the metal railing. She was Auxiliary. But for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted to be. The future of war. The war wasn't over. The humans knew it. The Auxiliary feared it. And Ziera. She had to decide which side she wanted to be on. Because she had seen the truth. The Auxiliary Empire would not be destroyed by human weapons. They would be destroyed by human minds, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The ultimate test, Ziara's choice. Ziara sat alone in her private chamber, her claws tapping against the metallic desk. The holographic message from the human general still floated in the air before her. "You don't have to be our enemy." The words echoed in her mind, refusing to leave. She was Silari, born into an empire that had dominated the stars for thousands of years. Silari did not question. Silari did not doubt. And yet here she was, caught between two impossible choices. If she returned to high command, she would be branded a failure, maybe even executed for incompetence. If she defected to the humans, she didn't know what would happen. But she knew one thing for certain. The war was not over. The humans hadn't launched a counterattack, but they weren't defeated. They were watching, waiting, planning. And Ziara had no doubt that when they struck back, the galaxy would never be the same. She took a deep breath and made her decision. The Xilari's last chance. A secret transmission came through, direct from the supreme strategist Varlos. He looked exhausted, worried. "Commander Ziara, we have received intelligence that the humans are preparing for an attack." His voice was measured, but there was a sharp edge of fear underneath. Ziara didn't react. She knew this was coming. "They have no fleet capable of challenging us." Varlos continued. "Yet they do not surrender." "Why?" Ziara folded her arms. "Because they don't need a fleet, fool." Humans had already won without firing a shot. They had turned Xilari soldiers against their own leaders, shattered the Empire's reputation, and made their enemies fear them. Ziara knew what was happening. The Xilari were desperate. They needed a way out of this war before it escalated. And that was why High Command had reached out to her. "You have spent the most time observing them," Varlos said slowly. "You understand them. We need your analysis." She could have laughed at the irony. They had ignored her before, dismissed her warnings, called her weak. Now they were begging for answers. The human counterattack begins. The humans made their move before the Xilari could. It started small, a subtle infiltration. Xilari warships lost control of their navigation systems, drifting off course without explanation. Fleet commanders found their communications hijacked, messages sent without their authorization, war protocols rewritten right under their noses. Entire supply chains collapsed overnight. Factories stopped producing weapons, transport routes were disrupted, and critical resources went missing. And yet no human ships had entered Xilari space. No invasions, no open warfare. The Xilari weren't being attacked. They were being taken apart from the inside. "What is this?" Varlos demanded. "A cyber war? A rebellion? Who is responsible?" Ziara exhaled. "This is how they fight," she said quietly. Humans didn't strike first. They made their enemies collapse under their own weight. The Xilari had started this war thinking they were the superior force. Now, they were trapped in an invisible battlefield where every system, every ship, every piece of their own technology could be turned against them. The last straw. And then it happened. An emergency alert flashed across every Xilari warship. A single transmission sent on all channels. A human child, no older than 10, appeared on the screen. She smiled. Checkmate. Ziara's breath caught. It was a game. The humans had been playing a game this entire time. And now, the Xilari were in checkmate. She turned to her officers, expecting chaos. But they didn't react in anger. They reacted in fear. For the first time in history, Xilari commanders were questioning their own orders. Some had already abandoned their posts. The war wasn't just unwinnable. It was already lost. Betrayal or salvation. Ziara took one last look at the Xilari warships struggling to maintain order. The empire she had once believed to be invincible was falling apart. She had a choice. She could fight for an empire that no longer deserved to rule. Or she could embrace the future. Her hands moved swiftly over her console. She disabled her ship's tracking beacon. She overrode the auxiliary fleet's command link, feeding false data back to High Command. She sent her final message to Earth. I am coming. And then, with a single command, her ship activated its jump drive. The stars stretched into infinite light. She was no longer auxiliary. She was no longer an enemy of Earth. She had made her choice. And deep inside, she knew. She had chosen right. Humanity's unexpected victory. Commander Sierra stood at the edge of the human war room, her sharp auxiliary eyes scanning the vast holographic displays before her. She had expected Earth's military command to be chaotic, filled with fearful officials scrambling to react. Instead, she found something far more terrifying. Humans weren't panicking. They were laughing. A group of human officers stood around a table, their faces illuminated by tactical readouts. One of them, a man with graying hair and a scar across his chin, grinned as he gestured toward auxiliary fleet diagram. They think they still have control, he said, shaking his head. They have no idea we've already won. Ziora's breath caught. She had defected to humanity, knowing they were unlike any species she had encountered. But even now, she hadn't expected this. The humans weren't just confident. They had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. She swallowed hard, stepping forward. What's our next move? The grizzled human general turned to her, his smile widening. We show them why no one picks a fight with Earth. The death of the Auxiliary Empire. Across the galaxy, the Auxiliary Empire crumbled. Not in flames, not in battle, but in silence. The human counterattack was not ships, soldiers, or weapons. It was information. Within days, every species in the galaxy had received the truth. The mighty Auxiliary had lost to a pre-spaceflight species. The Empire's enemies laughed. Their allies abandoned them. Entire Auxiliary colonies declared independence overnight. And worst of all, Auxiliary commanders began surrendering to humans, without a fight. Not out of cowardice, but because they had seen what the humans could do. And they knew no empire could survive a war against them. The last stand of High Command. Ziara had once feared Supreme Strategist Varlos. Now, as she watched his desperate transmission flicker across the human war room, she felt only pity. His face was pale, his once proud posture hunched. We request negotiations, he finally said, his voice hollow. The humans laughed again. Negotiations, the general beside Ziara smirked. Now you want peace, after you tried to wipe us out. Varlos clenched his fists. What are your terms? The humans didn't demand surrender. They didn't demand vengeance. They demanded something worse. The complete disarmament of the Auxiliary. A permanent ban on warfare. The dismantling of their empire. And most humiliating of all, the Auxiliary had to publicly acknowledge that they had been defeated by Earth. The Supreme Strategist trembled. You are monsters. The human general only smiled. We're just getting started. The new order. A year passed. The Auxiliary Empire no longer existed. Humanity had not claimed their worlds. They had not enslaved their people. They had done something far more dangerous. They had rewritten the balance of the galaxy. The old empires were afraid. The minor species now looked to Earth for leadership. Humanity, once seen as backward and primitive, was now the most feared and respected force in the universe. Ziora walked through the corridors of Earth's new intergalactic headquarters, passing representatives of a dozen species, each one seeking alliances, trade agreements, protection. The humans had won not just a war. They had won the future. And as Ziera stood beside her new allies, she finally understood. The greatest weapon in the galaxy wasn't technology. It wasn't firepower. It was a species that refused to lose. And that species was human.